Oh yeah, we're back, baby! It seems like you guys just can't get enough of those sweet, sweet, good games, and so we've returned yet again to tell you all about the very best of 2003. The year 2003 was iconic for a number of reasons. The Lord of the Rings trilogy was wrapped up in spectacular fashion with the Return of the King, the darkness made us believe in a thing called love, and teenagers the world over were devastated because both Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Dawson's Creek had their finales. It was also a great year to be a fan of video games, and for this list we're here to remind you of the finest that 2003 had to offer, at least according to the good folks over at GameRankings and Metacritic. As ever, a game qualifies for this list if it has received a minimum of 7 professional reviews and was released in at least one territory in 2003. We've excluded 1 or 2 ports and re-releases, so if you find that Metacritic's top 10 has games that we don't, that will be why. I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are the 10 best games of 2003. Number 10. Beautiful Joe, 93%. In the year following its launch in 2001, the GameCube didn't do very well sales-wise. It wasn't a bad console, but players were flocking to the PlayStation 2 in their millions, leaving the poor little GameCube without many friends. Still, Nintendo aren't ones to take things lying down, and so they teamed up with Capcom, who announced a string of games affectionately dubbed the Capcom 5 that was sure to bring all the boys and girls and others to the GameCube's yard. Among those 5 was Beautiful Joe, a side-scrolling beat-em-up that follows the titular Joe as he is thrust into movie land and attempts to save his girlfriend from kidnappers. In terms of gameplay, Beautiful Joe gave players side-scrolling, platforming, and something new in the form of the Beautiful Effects power, which was akin to the camera trickery seen in films. The game was a big hit with critics who lauded its originality, stunning cel-shaded graphics, and high-action gameplay, and though some were unimpressed by the variety of bosses on offer, most still agreed that it was a ton of fun to play. Beautiful Joe also garnered nominations for a whole bunch of awards and quickly became one of the best reasons to own a GameCube. Number 9. World Soccer Winning 11-6 International, 93%. When it comes to titles, World Soccer Winning 11-6-International isn't exactly the snappiest you'll come across, but don't let that put you off, because if you were after a brilliant football experience in 2003, then you really couldn't do much better. It's worth noting that in Europe, the game was called Pro Evolution Soccer 2, which is far less of a mouthful. Unlike some other football titles of the time, Winning 11-6 eschewed arcade-style gameplay in favor of a more realistic approach. This meant that players found that their first few matches ended in a loss as they got to grips with the game, but it was far from a bad thing, as it meant that they needed to spend more time playing it. Most critics agreed that, obviously, Winning 11-6 could only resonate with players who actually enjoyed football, but if you did like your footy, then the game was a triumph. Not only was the gameplay rich and deep, but the graphics were superb, the controls were tight, and the sound effects were pretty good to boot. The only thing that let it down was the cheesy music, but hey, that's why the mute button exists. Number 8. Soul Calibur 2, 93%. Do you like swords? Do you like evil swords? Then by golly, are you in for a treat with this next entry. The follow-up to 1998's Soul Calibur once again centered on the legendary weapon Soul Edge and the series' many characters' attempts to obtain its shards, either to reunite them or destroy them once and for all. Although it was originally released in arcades in 2002, Soul Calibur 2 didn't manage to make its way to home consoles until the following year. The fighting game featured 7 different gameplay modes, over a dozen playable characters including some, like Link, that were platform-specific, and over 200 weapons for players to collect. Admittedly, 1 or 2 outlets criticized Soul Calibur 2 for not building much upon the foundations that Soul Calibur laid, but in the sequel's defense, the original was fantastic, and the devs probably knew that their audience would be grateful for another game like it. Besides, Soul Calibur 2, whether evolved from its predecessor or not, was still a fantastic fighting game. Its graphics and animations were flawless, its gameplay was challenging, and it had plenty of content to keep players coming back time and time again. If you wanted a great weapon-based fighting game, there really was no better choice. Number 7. SSX 3, 93%. We're not sure what it is about snowboarding that's just so darned cool. It's probably all of the snow, to be honest, but that certainly lowers the temperature a little bit. Jokes aside, snowboarding is very impressive when done well, but sadly, we're not all lucky enough to live next to a big mountain or be well coordinated. Fortunately, there was no need to hop on a plane to the Alps back in the early 2000s, as the SSX series was on hand to fulfill all of your stiffy dreams. Stiffy's a snowboarding term, right? Like SSX and SSX Tricky, SSX 3 allowed players to choose from a number of snowboarders before sending them up a mountain to race and perform tricks. By successfully pulling off a trick, players filled their adrenaline meter, which could be used to boost their speed or to perform some uber tricks for big points. Critics were wowed by the game, citing everything from its technical advancements over its predecessors to its gameplay and graphics as a reason for SSX3's high review scores. In particular, both critics and players enjoyed just how fun it was to pull off the death-defying tricks, which they all agreed made them feel very cool. Number 6. Project Gotham Racing 2, 93.16%. You know, racing games are all well and good, but we don't feel like there are enough out there that reward players for being cool. Fortunately for cool people in 2003 though, the Project Gotham Racing series returned to not only give them fast cars, but also to give them points for pulling off sweet maneuvers in said fast cars. As was the case with its predecessor, the aim of Project Gotham Racing 2 was to undertake a series of challenges in a car. In the beginning, players are only able to choose from a small pool of vehicles, but as they progress, they earn kudos points which allow them to unlock a whole smorgasbord of different ones. There was no need to play alone either, as you could have your mates over to do things the old-fashioned way, or you could get yourself online and play with strangers across the globe thanks to Xbox Live. Trust us, if there was any game that was perfect for online multiplayer, it was this one. Critics had a lot of kind words for Project Gotham Racing 2, with some even going as far as to call it the finest racing title ever created. This was thanks to its smooth controls, polished graphics, and the soundtrack, which was full of absolute bangers. Number 5. NCAA Football 2004, 94%. If you were a fan of sports ball in 2003, then you were absolutely spoiled for choice when it came to smashing video games. We've already looked at a regular football title, and now it's time to turn our attention to football of the American variety. Clearly not content with their successful line of Madden titles, EA also produced a string of college football games up until 2013, including the fantastic NCAA Football 2004. The general gameplay was your typical football affair, just with college athletes rather than professional ones, but it was the introduction of online play in the PS2 version that really set NCAA football apart from its competitors. Of course, the local play was great, and both the Xbox and GameCube versions of the game still garnered decent scores even without online capability, but being able to jump into games with other people was what really made the PS2 edition superb. Aside from this, critics were impressed by the controls, which were tight and easy to get to grips with, the graphics, and the overall polish of the game. If college football was your jam, then NCAA Football 2004 was everything you could have possibly wanted from a game. Number 4. Madden NFL 2004, 94%. Well, if it isn't Madden NFL back for the third year in a row with another really good American football game. Are you happy, Madden NFL? Pleased with yourself? Yeah, I bet you are. I'll be honest here, there isn't much to say about the gameplay of Madden NFL 2004 that we haven't already said about its predecessors in other lists. Players controlled little avatars of their favourite football stars, and by making strategic plays, they could secure those all-important touchdowns. The vast majority of features were retained from the series' previous entries, but also included new options like the Owner Mode, which gave players the opportunity to control an entire franchise. This entailed everything from owning a professional football team to setting the prices of hot dogs at stadiums. Once again, critics were floored by Madden NFL's offering, praising it for hanging on to the mechanics they knew and loved, whilst also delivering additional modes that made the game worth buying even if you owned the previous ones. Hardcore fans of the sport would still get a kick out of the deep gameplay, but more casual fans could have fun charging silly prices at the concession stands. $15 for a cheeseburger? Disgusting. I'll have 3. Number 3. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, 94.21%. Look, guys, here comes the Star Wars. Have you played KOTOR? It's really great. You might become a Jedi or go to the dark side. Did I mention it's great? Well, that's enough of that. By 2003, it had been a disappointing few years for Star Wars fans. 2 decades had passed since Luke Skywalker and pals had blown up the Death Star for a second time, and the first 2 prequel movies just weren't the follow-ups that people had been hoping for. Fortunately, BioWare were on hand to give fans the epic story they'd been craving for years, and all without a trade dispute in sight. Released for the Xbox in July 2003 and later for PC, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic tells the story of an unnamed Force user who must travel across the galaxy in order to defeat Darth Malak. Not only did Knights of the Old Republic receive universal acclaim, with critics praising everything from its hugely impressive story and voice acting to its gameplay and turn-based combat, but it also sold millions of copies and won a buttload of awards, including a BAFTA for Best Xbox Game of the Year. KOTOR, more like KOT4, what a great game! Number 2. Championship Manager 4, 95%. You know, playing football is all well and good if you're super athletic, sporty and handsome, like we all are at TripleJump. But what if the good Lord endowed you with brains and not brawn? Well, fear not, my weak-limbed friend, because there are a bunch of games out there that allow you to get in on all of the soccer action and won't make you feel bad about the fact that you can't run up the stairs without getting out of breath. Championship Manager 4, as the name might suggest, allowed players to take control of a football team and guide them to success through careful management. See? Just like in the title. The game received a lot of praise from critics who were impressed by how much it had to offer. Players of any level could take on a team, be they Manchester United or Preston North End, and have a lovely time leading them to victory. There was so much to the game that it would be almost impossible to list all of its features, and every single one, from training to transfers, was executed flawlessly. Not only was it hugely realistic though, it was also tons of fun to play, and it's unsurprising that so many players sunk hundreds if not thousands of hours of their lives into it. This entry completed it, mate. Number 1. The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, 96%. Although it was originally released in Japan in December 2002, we here in the West had to wait until March or even May 2003 to play The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, but oh boy was it worth it! Unlike previous Zelda titles, The Wind Waker was set upon the open sea and saw Link sailing the ocean in order to explore islands and dungeons and ultimately obtain the power to defeat Ganon once again. The game retained a number of the mechanics that players enjoyed in earlier titles, such as the combat and puzzle solving, whilst introducing new ones like The Wind Waker, a baton that allows Link to control the wind and harness other powers by conducting music. Upon its release, The Wind Waker was met with universal acclaim. The new cel-shaded graphics received a great deal of praise from critics who compared them to those of Disney and Studio Ghibli founder Hayao Miyazaki. There was also a huge amount of love for the gameplay, control and camera systems, and the puzzles, as well as the expansive game world and level design. Some were divided by the amount of sailing on offer, but the naysayers probably just didn't have their sea legs yet. So congratulations, The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. Your excellence is an inspiration to us all.